In the medical field now, I am really steeped in this idea that addiction is a disease. It's a chronic relapsing and remitting disease. There's, verifiable brain chemistry changes that occurs. People become addicted.
And then there are no neurobiological correlates where we can look at the brains of someone who is addicted and compare it with someone who's not and be able to tell the difference. No neurobiological correlates.
And yet, and I believe that that's true, and yet there is this element of choice, right? Somewhere along the way, people can choose to get help. Really, that's the fundamental choice piece that's left. They can't necessarily choose to not drink or not use, but they can choose to say, I don't have the ability to choose or not choose to drink, but I do have the ability to hand it over to somebody else who might help me.
And this is just a quote from this particular article. It says, if early volunteer drug use goes undetected and unchecked, the resulting changes in the brain can ultimately erode a person's ability to control the impulse to take addictive drugs. Now, one of the things that I love about science is that we have these clear sort of dependent measures that we've defined, we operationally define or whatever, and we see it. And then you measure it and it's clear. Now, I don't know how we measure the eroding of a person's ability to control the impulse to take addictive drugs. I don't know exactly how she measured this kind of thing. By the way, there's no data that has ever measured this in humans, certainly.
The other thing that we know, and this is, really kind of what the book is about, is that if we expose ourselves chronically to substances or behaviors that repeatedly release large amounts of dopamine in our brain's reward pathway, that we can change our tonic baseline and actually lower it over time as our brain tries to compensate for all of that dopamine, which is more really than we were designed to experience.
Just knowing that dopamine increases the activity, the dopamine activity is increased in response to amphetamine, to cocaine. Knowing that doesn't really tell you anything about the behavioral effects, nor the pleasure or whatever, but we pretend that it does, and it really doesn't, because you can give a drug that selectively blocks the reuptake of dopamine, and you won't get cocaine-like pleasure.
People are more depressed, more anxious, more suicidal, and more addicted than they were 30 years ago. And I contend that one of the main reasons is because of this relentless pursuit of pleasure that essentially adjusts the dopamine levels, changes the hedonic or pleasure set point to make people anhedonic, meaning without joy.
Dopamine represents less than 1% of the brain neurotransmitters. And you're talking about what you just described as some complex human behaviors. Like people narrowed down drug addiction to dopamine back in the 1980s. And so that's like my brain education happened then. I studied Parkinson's disease, which is a dopamine depletion disease. And so I know dopamine really well. So I recognize frauds easily with dopamine.
And dopamine is the most important neurotransmitter involved in motivation and reward. And the fundamental difference between things that are addictive and those that aren't is that things that are addictive release a lot more dopamine.
I'm friends with Dr. Anna Lembke, who wrote Dopamine Nation.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've read that book, but it makes a great argument. And you're right, it does make you sound smart when you talk about dopamine. And according to these books, they do have ways of measuring dopamine, and they cite things like...
Nope, they don't. That's a lie.
They don't.
It's an absolute lie. I mean, I know this better than anybody, this part. This is what I do. You can't measure dopamine in the human brain. There's no direct measurement of dopamine in the human brain. You can't do that.
So we have dopamine firing in our brain that occurs at a tonic baseline. And when we do something that's rewarding or pleasurable, we get a little rise in dopamine levels or a spike. So for example, chocolate increases dopamine levels about 50% above baseline. Sex is about 100%. Nicotine is about 150%. And things like methamphetamines are 1,000%, partially because of their specific mechanism.
One of the things that happen when you get stressed out, angry, whatever, your dopamine levels increase. Pleasure, dopamine levels increase. It increases in response to a wide range of stimuli. So if you get in an ice bath, it might be because of the stress response. It might increase. But a lot of other things also are increasing. Cortisol, norepinephrine, a wide range of other things. Why are you picking out dopamine? So we asked them, well, why dopamine? What's special about dopamine? And I don't know what they'll say, but that's the thing to ask. Why dopamine?
Yeah, it's gotten quite popular. I mean, if you put out a video that has dopamine in the title, it gets a lot of views. Yeah.
Yep.